Hello everyone, William here, and I am here to talk to you about American Ninja Warrior Ninja vs. Ninja, the second playoff episode. I'm going to do it in a timely manner. So, this was a good episode. I really liked this episode, overall. First up, we had Frostbite versus LaBreckfast Club. They made a big deal about how LaBreckfast Club went undefeated in their episode, which was very impressive. LaBreckfast Club was my pick. But first matchup, Nick Hanson versus Chris DiGangi. Nick simply went faster than Chris. He had the lead literally from the first obstacle and kept it the entire time. It was close, but he ended up winning. And I noticed this happened a lot, that there's a lot of lane switching this episode at the Warped Wall. Nick and Chris switched lanes. It's a good thing there's no penalty for that, otherwise this would have been an awkward episode. But yeah, Nick ended up winning. Frostbite goes up 1-0. Then it was Zhanique Lovett versus Jeri Labreck. This was essentially determined by the swinging pipes. Basically, Zhanique tried going over the second pipeline and ended up getting all tied up and hung up as Jeri went underneath the second one, and gave Jeri more than enough time, to make it to the end, go up the Warped Wall. Except she also switched lanes, which was kind of weird. Third matchup, Meyer versus Alexis Jr. This was very similar. Alexis was able to get a lead on the pipes and kept the lead the entire time despite Jackson's best efforts, and finished first. So the Breakfast Club had a 2-1 advantage heading into the relays. Basically, what happened was Nick Hanson ended up wiping out on the tiles, and this spelled doom for Frostbite, as on the shorter relay, a 5-second penalty is nearly impossible to overcome. Not completely, but especially when it's the second leg you fall on. And Chris DiGangi finished easily first place. The Breakfast Club wins 3-1 and move on to the quarterfinals. So then we had Phoenix Force versus Team Wolfpack. I didn't have Phoenix Force winning this one. I kind of made a point about how just, unfortunately, Cassie was a huge liability for the team. And that ended up being the case. So first up, Michael Torres and Dory. It was a really close race. This was a really good race, but Dory ended up winning between the two. Cassie Craig versus Jeri DiRurio. Cassie had a rough go. She was able to beat the TikTok, which is good, because that obstacle gave her a lot of trouble in her episode. But she got stuck trying to get to that first pipe on the swinging pipeline, and Jeri just got a huge lead. At one point, Cassie lost her shoe. I just remember watching that and being like, oh, she's done. And she actually cleared, but by the time Cassie got to the staircase, she fell. And Jeri went on to finish anyway, even though she switched lanes on the Warped Wall for some reason. And Wolfpack ended up going up 2-0. So next up was Najee Richardson against Yager. And for this race, I was watching this episode with my father, who watches Ninja Warrior on and off. So it just so happens that he wasn't really familiar with Najee, just because he hadn't seen him. And I was making a point Najee, he's so good, he's a really good competitor. And then the run happened, and right away Najee slips up on the Sonic Swing, gets his foot wet. Not a good start. And then he wipes out on the floating tiles, trying to catch up after falling behind right in the beginning. And I'm like, I swear this is an anomaly, I told him. And Wolfpack, the first wildcard team to make it to the quarterfinals, gets the sweep in the playoffs, and they go on to face LaBreckfast Club on the extended course. So this was a good matchup. I would say of all the final matchups, this one was my favorite so far of each episode, especially the ending. Good ending. So first up, they had John Alexis Jr. versus Ian Dory. John Alexis, it was a good race, I would say. Ian was able to get a lead early on the TikTok after John got his foot wet on the Sonic Swing, but John was able to get ahead, just barely get ahead on the rumbling dice, which is a good strategy because then you force your opponent to have to clear the zigzag climb. And unfortunately for John, he could not get his footing this time around on the zigzag climb. He was struggling. To my understanding, it's generally agreed upon that taller people can have a harder time in the spider walk obstacles, just because longer legs, more awkward angle, harder to hold yourself up. So he was really struggling, and he ended up falling, and Ian Dory cleared. So Wolfpack goes up 1-0. Jesse Labreck versus Jeri. So before this episode, the marketing was making a really big deal to advertise the fact that some sort of new history-making thing was going to happen in this episode, and immediately I predicted, and I wrote this on Twitter so you can look this up, I predicted that a woman was going to clear the extended course. And then at the beginning of the run between these two, Iceman made sure to point out that no woman has cleared the extended course yet, and I'm like, I wonder what's going to happen. And so, basically Jeri got soaked on the pipes early on, fell waist deep. This took a lot of pressure off of Jesse, and Jesse made a good effort making it to the rumbling dice before falling, Jeri made it to the rumbling dice before falling. But then Jesse Labreck cleared the zigzag climb and became the first woman to clear the extended course. Really cool, really well-earned point. So things are tied up 1-1. Then it went down to Chris DiGangi and Dan Yager. So this was interesting because Dan was able to get the lead on the staircase. He got to the single section first, if I remember correctly. Chris DiGangi was able to get a slight lead on the rumbling dice. The key thing here is that Dan Yager got his foot wet dismounting the rumbling dice, trying to keep up with Chris. And he could not properly mount the zigzag climb. Every time he jumped up, his feet would slip, and he couldn't move anywhere. He was stuck at the starting line, and you could just see how frustrated he was as he watched Chris get further and further up the obstacle, and there was nothing he can do. He watched victory just travel away from him, and LaBreckfast Club takes the 2-1 advantage going into the relay. And good thing too, LaBreckfast Club ended up making kind of a questionable decision with their lineup for the first relay, putting John Alexis in the last leg, which I thought was weird considering he was the only member of the three who didn't complete the zigzag climb. That ended up being a major part of the story, because even though Jesse got the lead and Chris kept the lead for LaBreckfast Club, Ian Dory blazed through the rumbling dice and, more importantly, blazed through the zigzag climb, and John fell on the obstacle again. And I cannot understate just how well Ian Dory did the zigzag climb. It was very impressive, very fast. And we ended up having a 2-2 tie, so final relay was required, and we finally got to see some intergender racing on this leg as LaBreckfast Club, who Jesse is the captain of, made the call. John was going to take the first leg, and when I saw this, I thought, oh, that meant Jesse's taking the second leg. No, she was taking the last leg. I was very surprised. I didn't know what to expect. But yeah, basically, I kind of figured the plan was to give Jesse as much of a lead as they can, and I think they accomplished that. Basically, John obviously was able to outrace Jeri, but it wasn't as much of a lead as I thought it was going to be. Jeri held her own against John, but the big thing here is that while trying to catch up to Chris, Dan Yager fell on the staircase. This gave Jessie a 5-second head start, which honestly I think is a bigger lead than what she would have had if Dan didn't fail, in my personal opinion. And so she had the lead. She did fairly well on the salmon ladder and the rumbling dice. There was a moment of hesitation on the dismount of the rumbling dice that I thought was going to cost her. And Dory was catching up, and it came down to the zigzag climb, and Jessie had the lead, but you see Ian coming from behind her, and it's like, oh man, Jessie, she's doing it fast, but it looked like Ian was doing it faster. I'm like, Jessie, if you're gonna pull this off, you got to go faster. But then Dory falls, and so we'll never know if Ian would have caught her. But Jessie finishes the race, and LaBreckfast Club wins 3-2. Easily my favorite ending to an episode of Ninja vs. Ninja so far. Just fantastic showing, I think, from Jessie Labreck this episode. And afterwards they obviously she was elated, she was excited, she was happy, and as well she should be. She very well should be. And they kind of explained why Jessie went last, and it's that they felt like she was the best at the zigzag climb, that she went faster than Chris, and unlike John, she could clear it. So they are the second team to move on to the semifinals of the tournament for the final episode. So it's going to be very interesting to see. I think they got a good shot. I mean, Iron Grips is strong too, so it's shaping up to be a good final episode. Anyway. For some reason, this episode was pushed back a week. All the episodes pushed back a week. I'm not sure why, because USA didn't show anything new last week. It was just a repeat of the Cromartie, so I'm not sure why. I think maybe it's because they wanted the last episode to be the same night as the first Monday episode of American Ninja Warrior, but that's just speculation on my part. So yeah, next week we got Party Time, Tryhards, two other teams, Lizard Kings, and who was the other team? Hashtag Ninjas, right, of course. I know I put Lizard Kings in my top 3, but honestly, I think it's going to be Party Time is moving on. That's just my pick. We'll see what happens. So, hey, thank you all for watching. Let me know what you think of that episode, and I'll see you next time. See ya.